Hi, everybody. It's Sophia Mona Lisa of the Golden Ray Center and the Rose Wheel Mystery School. And I'm really excited about this video that I'm bringing you today related to an aspect in the sky. Turns out that this aspect and another aspect coming in a few days are kind of partner aspects, giving us two more data points on our quantum timeline. So I'm calling this video journal the Overself Awakening. And there's a reason why it's called the Overself Awakening and not the Awakening Overself. And so I'll explain that to you when we get towards the end and we're talking about the two data points and especially the event that's in the sky today. It's a really magical day. So here we go. Before I get into those two new data points, what I'd like to do is to kind of tie the quantum timeline all together for us in terms of the different data points, just to kind of give a summary of where we're going with this quantum timeline, and just to kind of remind you of the pieces that I've been dropping in all of these previous videos. So first, what we're going to do is we're going to start here with these first two data points that go back to two of the Venus gate activations, the one in February and the one in March, the one that happened at the solar chakra, solar plexus chakra, which is the portal of personal power, and then the one that happened at the heart chakra, the portal of compassion. So when I talked about those two data points, what I was explaining is that our compassionate heart space, which the heart chakra represents, was actually being surgically prepared by having this electrical upgrade, so that when the next piece happened, which was the quantum transplant, the heart space would have been prepared and upgraded to prevent any type of transplant rejection, so to speak, from happening. So those first two data points, just in summary, was about preparing this heart chakra space with this electrical upgrade, right? Giving it more ampage, so to speak, to be able to receive and contain what was going to be happening through the transplant procedure without rejecting that. Okay, the next two data points here are this May 20th and June 5th data points. This is when Mars was in Leo, standing across the sky from Aquarius, and then when Venus was in Leo, standing across the sky, Mars in Leo standing across the sky from Pluto and Aquarius, and Venus in Leo standing across the sky from Pluto and Aquarius. So let's look at what those two data points are doing for us. And what I want to point out here, because you're going to see this trend, is that Mars is experiencing these activations ahead of Venus. Mars being the sacred masculine, Venus being the sacred feminine. And I always say that the role of the sacred masculine is to serve and support the sacred feminine. So as Mars is having these activations first, he's kind of like out there in the jungle with the machete, clearing the path, so to speak, for Venus to now come behind him and also receive the same kind of activation, Venus being the sacred feminine. So you're going to see that as we go through these data points. First, the sacred masculine as Mars gets activated, and then the sacred feminine as Venus gets activated. So with these two data points on May 20th and June 5th, this is when we had the quantum transplant of the sacred masculine or the divine masculine above, transplanting the inner masculine that we are carrying within us as human beings that were born onto this planet. And you're going to see later on why this is significant. And then, of course, we had the quantum transplant of the sacred feminine, the divine feminine, transplanting the feminine energy that, again, that we kind of inherited as we were incarnated onto this planet Earth. So that quantum transplant is when those two data points happened. After the quantum transplant, oh, here we go. Here we go. If you saw the little 7-minute video I did about the message from Medusa, you will be aware that I discovered recently that there is a key in this book, the Book of Knowledge, the Keys of Enoch, that relates exactly to the work that we are doing through the Galactic New Earth Project, and it relates to these data points that I've found on this quantum timeline. And this speaks to what I was talking about in terms of understanding why it's significant that the divine masculine and the divine feminine are transplanting the inner masculine and the inner feminine that we inherited when we were incarnated in these human bodies on this earth. And so in the introduction, J.J. Hurtak writes, the Enoch keys were given directly to me beyond the confinement of the earth and the air regions surrounding the earth, so that they would not be contaminated by the fallen thought forms of higher intelligence that influence the destructive pathways of humanity. This even speaks back to when I was talking before about the reboot of the sacred feminine's voice, and how I acknowledge that, you know, there are all kinds of people that have been doing work to support the reemergence of the sacred feminine, but that the voice of the sacred feminine had to be rebooted from the divine feminine, because it was like having a white shirt that you'd spilled coffee on and it had a stain. It's a stain that you're on this shirt that you can't get out. It's not a shirt you're going to wear out to dinner with friends, but a shirt that you might wear around the house. This stain on the shirt that I was referencing ties back into this contamination aspect that he references here in the introduction, that these fallen thought forms from the higher intelligence contaminate our fields, whether we like it or not, right? Once you spill the coffee on a white shirt, that shirt's ruined. You're not going to be able to get the stain out. And of course, if you know anything about thought forms, once they're created, they're out there. And so, you know, Abraham Hicks talked about a woman that showed up in one of their events and wanted to know why, you know, every day she drives back and forth across the Golden Gate Bridge, never had a problem, but now all of a sudden she was like being paralyzed with fear as she was driving over the bridge. And Abraham was telling her it's because her frequency had dropped, and she was being influenced by all of the thought forms that still existed around all of the people that worked on the bridge and lost their lives during the building of that bridge. These thought forms are there, and we've got to be vigilant about keeping our frequency high so that they cannot trip us up. And so in this same way that J.J. Hurtak was given these keys from Enoch outside of the realm where those thought forms were existing, so that the keys would not be tainted, contaminated. This is why we had this quantum transplant. When we are born onto this earth, the inner feminine and the inner masculine is contaminated, for lack of a better word. It's got all of the baggage from your ancestral lineage, And it's got all of the baggage of the collective consciousness of humanity. And then you've got these higher intelligence forms, that these fallen higher intelligence forms that know how to manipulate through their thought forms. And so you've got that going on as well. So hopefully that explains to you the significance behind the quantum transplant that we experience with the divine masculine coming in and transplanting our inner masculine, and the divine feminine coming in and transplanting our inner feminine. And we're going to see the result of that significance in a few slides. Okay, so let's talk about the next two data points. Right here, May 22nd and June 11th, we've got Mars in Leo squaring Jupiter in Taurus, and then following him, Venus in Leo squaring Jupiter in Taurus. So we've had the quantum transplant. And so what happens is that the physical body has got to be able to anchor in the higher frequencies of the divine masculine and the divine feminine. We know Taurus is all about embodiment. We know that Jupiter expands and amplifies everything it comes into contact with. And so after this quantum surgical procedure, this quantum transplant, these data points are enabling our body to have the expansion that it requires in our own physical vessels to be able to come up to that frequency point so that it can anchor those divine energies within our physical bodies. Again, this is a part of the process, the transplanting process, that prevents the body from rejecting this work. So after we had the two data points where we were anchoring those higher frequencies from the divine feminine and the divine masculine, we had, where did my, here it is. These are out of order. Sorry about that. We had the summer solstice on June 21st. And on the same day, we had another Venus gate activation, the activation of the crown chakra, which we call the portal of authority. So let me go back, because the slide is out of order, and show you, if you'll remember from the video that I did, the June creative energies, when I talked about the solstice, I talked about how Osiris, the cosmic Christ, is standing across the sky from this star in Pegasus, and how they are making a T-square to the solstice point. So what we see here is that the solstice point is getting this huge activation by Pegasus and by the cosmic Christ. And I'm going to speak to that more specifically in a little bit. We also see here that Enif, the brightest star in Pegasus, is making a trine to that solstice point. So the solstice point is receiving frequencies from two of those stars in Pegasus in very significant aspects. And then we've got the North Node in Taurus making a sextile to that solstice point. And so, of course, the North Node is all about the evolutionary GPS of humanity. And what is it that we are destined to embody, Taurus here, through this T-square that's going on, right? T-squares, you've got two squares here. So this is major opportunity for breakthroughs in consciousness. And so let's go past the quantum timeline here, where we've got those 2 points happening, and move forward from there. And what we discover is that several days before the solstice, we had this amazing event happen with the Schumann resonance. Now, the Schumann resonance is also called the heartbeat of the earth. And you can see it's normally from 7 to 8 hertz. This is what it normally looks like. This is a picture of what it was back in April 20th, 2023. But from the new moon in Gemini on the 18th of June up through those 3 days prior to the solstice, what happened was the Schumann resonance just went off the charts. And it went from 7 to 8 hertz all the way up to, hold on a second, 185 hertz. And when it did that, it started making this very beautiful sacred geometry pattern, a pattern that some people even say looks like DNA. Now, these frequencies affect our brain waves and our consciousness. So we can see here these different levels of consciousness in terms of our brain waves. We've got the delta consciousness, theta consciousness, alpha, beta, and gamma. And with the Schumann resonance at its normal rate of 7 to 8 hertz, you see that that falls within the alpha brain wave. This is why when you go out and you sit on the grass and you allow yourself to be grounded by the earth's frequencies, by her heartbeat, you start to feel very relaxed, okay? But on those 3 days before the solstice, it jumped up to 185 hertz. This is even beyond the range that they give us for the gamma consciousness, which is all about expanded states of consciousness. Now, this is going to become extremely relevant. So what happened is on the solstice, Gaia herself, the goddess Gaia, who embodies our Earth as a planet, received through these Schumann resonance frequencies, she received an activation. The inner flame of the Christos Sophia was ignited within her. And if you remember back in my June Creative Energies movie, when I was when I was talking about the solstice, I said that the solstice was the perfect time to harness those solar frequencies to ignite the sacred flame of your inner Christos Sophia. Of course, I wasn't looking ahead. I wasn't looking more deeply at what was coming down the pike. How could I have possibly even known that those 3 days before the solstice that we would be experiencing a Schumann resonance of 185 hertz? And so what happened is that spontaneously, organically, not only did Gaia herself get that igniting of the sacred flame of the inner Christos Sophia within her own heart, but all of humanity did as well. And as I've said before, when you're talking about your inner flame, your sacred flame, we're talking about this blue flame that represents Christ, divine will, this rose flame, which represents Sophia, divine wisdom. And I always say that the manifestation of their union, Christ and Sophia, is divine love. And that's what this golden flame represents, the divine love. So this was a huge activation that was completely unanticipated. I mean, we can choose to work with the frequencies, but this was something spontaneous that was a result of those Schumann resonance frequencies going all the way up to 185 hertz. Keeps getting better. So now we've all had this sacred flame ignited within us, right? The Christ and the Sophia. And so what's happening? Get to my next slide. What I personally experienced on the solstice was what I told a friend felt like a convergence point. And I literally described it to her as like something that would happen in the Hadron Collider over in CERN, where light particles are racing towards each other colliding, converging, and exploding into more and more light. And of course, that was after 3 days of those Schumann resonance being at the 185 hertz. I could feel it in my field and in my body. So now that this has transpired, those Pegasus frequencies that were involved with the solstice through the trine and through the T-square make much more sense, because with Pegasus, we experience transformation through embodiment. And of course, we did have that sextile to the North Node in Taurus that was also showing us that whatever was going to happen through that T-square, and little did we know, remember, the cosmic Christ is on the other end, that it was going to be this spontaneous igniting of the sacred flame of our inner Christos Sophia, that this and being able to embody that sacred flame of the Christos Sophia is going to cause a huge transformation within us. So let's see what that's going to look like. What it's going to do for us is it's going to help us rise above this earthbound existence, having this flame ignited within us. And we're going to see how that's going to kind of unfold for us. All right. Here is our quantum timeline again. And now we've got these two new quantum data points. The one that's happening today, June 26th, and the one that's going to happen in about 6 days, July 2nd. So what we've got going on today is Mars is in Leo, and he's squaring Uranus in Taurus. This is happening at 21 degrees. Isn't it interesting that 2 and 1 make a 3? And Tesla said that the mysteries of the universe are based in the numbers 3, 6, and 9. And then when Venus comes along and has her activation, it's happening at the same degree, 21 degrees. So let's see what all of that's going to do for us. So keep in mind, today, June 26th, is the Mars square to Uranus. July 2nd, you might want to mark this on your calendar, is going to be the Venus square to Uranus. And what's happening has to do with this key, chapter 3.1.7. Here, the physical creation is no longer separated from the divine Ein Sof because of the fall of the last eon, but is restored through the Christ light penetrating the flesh and the divine light penetrating the Overself, so that both perfected spiritual and physical bodies become one in the sight of the Father. Now, you have to understand what the Overself is, and he's got a glossary in the back of this book, and he gives very extensive definitions of the terms that he's using. But basically, in the way that I translate what he's saying, it's your light body. It's that highest part of yourself, the highest frequency part of yourself, your light body. That's, to me, what the Overself is. And so he goes on to say, a whole new species is being created at this time by the bringing together of the Adamic Overself, human creation, which will allow this spiritual biological expression of the Christ race to be advanced to the next consciousness time zone of creation. So that might be a little challenging to understand, but essentially what this means to me and how I'm translating it and how I'm seeing it being directly connected to this Mars square Uranus and Venus square Uranus data points is that This awakening that we're having is not like the Kundalini awakening, right? The Kundalini energy is stored at the base of your spine. It's already fully embodied. And when it awakens, it moves up your spine through the Ida and the Pingala and the Sushumna, and it activates you. This activation that's happening with our now embodied divine masculine, divine feminine, Christ and Sophia, right? And that flame has been ignited. This Overself Awakening is completely the reverse kind of awakening. Instead of the awakening energy coming from the root chakra within the body up, what's happening is our Overself, which is already fully awakened, is sending its light down into us to awaken us from above. This is why when he says that this spiritual biological expression, this is allowing this spiritual biological expression of the Christ race to be advanced to the next consciousness time zone of creation. I've been telling you all along, it is encoded in our DNA that we are Christed beings. This awakening that's happening through today's event of Mars square Uranus and July 2nd, Venus square Uranus, with this Overself sending its light, this pure divine light down into us and awakening us from above, from beyond the air, the regions of any kind of tainted thought form. This is pure divinity coming in and awakening us from above. This is huge. And the reason why I call it the Overself Awakening is because, and not the awakening Overself, is because the Overself is already awakened. So we're not waking it up, it's descending within us and awakening us. And so it may sound like semantics, but there's significant differences in the translation of the frequency when you switch the words around. So this is huge for those in humanity that are ready to receive this kind of an awakening. And the result of this kind of an awakening is that we are being freed from the matrix. We are no longer bound by 3D. 3D stuff out there can no longer impact us, can no longer impede us, because we saw through those Pegasus energies that were feeding into that solstice point that we have risen above this earth-bound existence. So do not be dismayed. Do not be surprised when you start having more and more 5D plus experiences and manifestations in your external reality, because that is just evidence of manifestations of the fact that these two squares between the sacred masculine, the sacred feminine, and Uranus, which is all about, right? Uranus is that lightning bolt, boom, right? And that's what the Overself is doing. It's coming down, boom, like a lightning bolt, and it's waking us up. You're going to have all kinds of mystical experiences from this. And what's happening in this 3D world about, you know, whatever, the Trump, the DeSantis, the Biden, the red, blue bullshit, it's not going to matter to you. Is Wagner over there trying to create a coup, or is it all AI? It's not going to matter to you, because this reality is no longer our reality. We are creators, Christed creators that create from that love that is the union of our inner Christ in Sophia. And so, you know, when in the Bible, they talk about God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. You know what? The fact that these quantum timelines have lined up for us to have an awakening straight from our overself, which is the divine, which is source, which is God, or the extension of God, that shows you the love that the Creator has for humanity. And so whatever those crazy fallen higher intelligences thought that they could do to interfere with the divine plan, they were sorely mistaken, because as I've said time and time again, the Sophia Christ consciousness knows how to take anything that they throw at humanity and use it for its own purposes. And so just pay attention to today, over the next week, when Venus then comes into the square to Uranus, and through July, to see what starts showing up. And it can happen in the blink of an eye. So thank you for staying with me to watch this video. I hope that you are as excited about what's going on as I am. And, you know, again, I want to just thank you for being a patron and demonstrating your commitment to this sacred work, to this incredible awakening process. And I will see you the next time. Bye-bye.